Okay guys, so today I'm going to have a bit of a talk with you regarding your experiments and how to develop them, especially in your second year. So some of you will have been in the session the other day and you will have seen this all, which is great, but for those of you that were not, this is a really good example to help you guys with your experimentations and how to develop your work. Because you were in the second year, we need to be developing your work much further, okay, and really pushing the boundaries to be achieving those higher grades, okay, and thinking about really where you can go with your work and how you can push ideas. So this is a really good example. It's really well laid out and it shows great variation in experimentation. So this is a good prep page as well. Now, layout is so important in your journals because it helps us see a clear trail of thought in your ideas. Obviously, we are not mind readers, so when we mark your work, it's so important that it flows correctly and you're showing us how you've gone from one idea to the next, okay, which is also really important for if the moderator comes in. So this is a great prep page as it's really clearly laid out, and they've got the primary source here probably from their photo shoot. They've got their secondary sources of sort of textures and flowers here. They've got thumbnail sketches they've done, and they've sort of selected this as the one that they're kind of focusing on. And then they've got their contextual artist here as well. And obviously they've also given a bit of insight into their contextual artist and sort of why they've picked them. So, literally, I don't know if you guys can hear that, but it's like I've literally started recording and someone's decided to start chopping down trees outside. It's fantastic. So experimentation here. So this is where they're going on to start that first experimentation. So they've discussed their idea here. They've even gone as far as showing some development of their thumbnail, which you wouldn't necessarily need to do, but it's nice. It adds a little bit more to it here. They've got their floral inspirations, and they've gone on to creating that first experiment in the style of that thumbnail. They've shown their menus here as well. So this one, I guess, could have been a little bit bigger, but you get the gist. That's the outcome from their first development. Then they've gone on to thinking about how they could take that design a little bit further. And they started off with colour variation. And they've even said here, initial colour variation. So they've got a range of different colour variations here, but they haven't just played around with the sliders and thought this is one colour, this is another colour. They've actually even picked out specific elements to change in the colour. So maybe the background colour has changed, but the body remains the same, or maybe the face colour has changed, but the background remains the same. So don't forget you can pick out different elements rather than just selecting the sliders, okay? So they've even got some where the flowers are different colours, but the other parts remain the same. So for instance, here all the flowers have turned pink, but the background colours have remained the same. Okay, and then down the bottom here they've selected out their two kind of favourite colour examples, and they've said that they're both quite harmonious and they stand out due to the complementary colours that I've used. So that's that sort of first development of their experimentation, looking at colour variations. They then continue on to look at hair and flower variations. So they thought, okay, well, the style and shape of the hair could change how the outcome looks. Now, they could have added on some more images here of people with different hairstyles, as that would have helped aid their AO1 and their observation. However, obviously, it still works here, so they thought about adding more of a curl to the hair, making it bigger or thinner, okay, and then they've gone for a shorter style as well, okay, and they've kind of added on a bit here about the composition, how the composition of the image has changed. They've then thought about the background shape. So rather than going having this circular shape, they thought, okay, well, how could the shape of the background change? And they've also added in patterns and textures to that and discussed some of that. And again, they've linked it to some influences. On this page, they then thought even further about how the facial features of the design could change the way it looks. So particularly they're focusing on eyebrows, which is really interesting here because eyebrows are often how we express ourselves. Okay, so we can express ourselves a lot through our eyebrows. They've got this kind of contextual influence here. And then they've started experimenting with the shape of the eyebrows. And now they've gone on to some more flower variations, okay, shaping variations of the body as well. Okay, so they're really pushing that design and really changing it up. Okay, lastly, we're looking at development of tonal variations. So again, they're thinking about how they can illustrate it to make it less 2D and start to appear more 3D by adding in tone. Okay, and again, playing around with those different colours and shapes, and they've added that annotation. So it's not reams of annotation, but it's obviously just thinking about and discussing it a bit more. And again, they've got some influences here with their colour. So thinking about, you know, they said about blooming and bright colours and kind of spring colours. So again, they've got some association with that there. On this page, they've then thought about the background again and the head surround, and they've used these sort of 1950s, 1960s style hairdresser images to help inform them, and they've continued to develop it a little bit more. The flowers have changed again. They've got the flowers over the eyes this time, so it's changed up the style. And they've got some screenshots through here as well. So in terms of your screenshots, obviously, again, it's really good to show screenshots throughout, but you don't need to necessarily screenshot every single thing that you do, okay? Especially if it's something that's quite repetitive, okay? And you're doing the same sort of thing for every different element. So use your screenshots for whenever you're changing something or doing something slightly differently. So here they're showing the different brush and the adjustments of the brush that they've used to create a different style or effect, okay? So lastly, they've then got all those experimentations and they've picked out all their favourite ones from their developments and sort of showed the outcomes here. So you've got that first outcome from that first design. You've then got the second one where they started to play around a bit more with the background shape and the style of flower. And then you've got this third one where they were looking at the tone of the skin and also the kind of head surround outcome. And then they've again showed a couple more to show the details and the patterns in the background here. And what's really nice is that they've also added it onto their mock-up to see how it would look. Okay, so they've added that design to their mock-ups to give you an overall finish. So if we scroll back all the way to the start, where they've got their initial kind of thumbnail idea, to start with, we can really see how that first outcome develops, okay? And they've obviously done some typography previously, so they've added their typography in as well. So you can see that first idea really clearly transcend into this one here. But if we then look at where we've ended up, we've obviously got quite a different style, okay? But you can still see the links between the two, and all that work in between shows clearly how we've gone from one stage to the other. So it's okay if your final kind of developments really start to move away from that first initial idea. That's absolutely fine, okay? So that the whole point of development is, you know, really pushing it and thinking, how can I go from one area to the next, basically? How can I develop? How can I move on from that? Okay, so it's absolutely fine if if it starts to stray, as long as there's been a clear path between how you've kind of got to that direction, which with this there is, which is why it's such a good example to use. So hopefully that has helped you. Now, if you're doing illustration, sort of poster design, any of those kind of particular areas, you probably should be aiming to have this level of development to be really pushing for those higher grades. You know, the student's an A grade student. So really pushing for that higher grade, really thinking about the development. Okay, so this is their second experimentation. So they've already done one experimentation and reams of development before, and this is now their second. Remember, this is a really long project, so you've got that time to really develop that work. If you're doing surface pattern, it would look slightly different, but you could still do that level of development by thinking about how you can really alter and change your pattern by adding brushes, by adding textures, adding different elements to it. Maybe you want to add more illustration to it, maybe you want to add more vectors to it, maybe you want to do different layer effects, different scales of repeat. So all of that would be developing your pattern further. If you were doing character or concept art, it would be slightly different, because obviously it's much more time consuming to create an outcome with those areas. However, it could be that you take sections of your work, or you particularly look at developing the clothing. So if you've got a character wearing clothing, you might look at developing the clothing by trying different styles of clothing, adding different textures to create different effects of that clothing, adding different patterns. If you were doing a landscape, concept landscape. Maybe you want to play around with lighting effects to give a different style. Maybe you might play around with different filters and brush strokes on it to show different kind of styles and effects. Maybe different colour variations again. So you'd probably do it in a slightly different style to these. Your variations are going to be maybe a little bit more simplistic and quicker, because actually creating the entire thing took a lot longer, so it might be slightly different in that sense. But hopefully, as I said, this helped you guys with your thinking going forward from there.